Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining our Closing the Digital Divide in Los Angeles event. My name is Jerelyn Rodriguez. I'm the co-founder and CEO at the Knowledge House. And this is the second installment of our event series, focusing on the Knowledge House, expanding to new sites, connecting with local community and business leaders on the ground to share from their perspective how the digital divide has been impacted by COVID, how the Knowledge House and other job training programs can support businesses and job seekers on the ground, and how we can all work together to make it happen. So I wanted to just start with a quick overview about the Knowledge House before I introduce our panelists. So the Knowledge House mission is to empower and sustain a talent pipeline of technologists and digital leaders who will uplift their communities out of poverty. And this year is very exciting because we are expanding to Newark, New Jersey, Atlanta, Georgia, and Los Angeles. And these are our two core programs. So these are the programs that we are expanding to our new sites. The first program is called the Innovation Fellowship, and it is a 12-month program that provides technical training to adult job seekers, and they get to choose between data science, cybersecurity, web development, and design. The second program is called the Kareem Carbush Coding Fellowship. It is for high school students interested in careers in tech. It was co-founded by hip hop artist French Montana, and it currently exposes youth to college and non-college career pathways so that they can pursue tech careers. And these are some of the employers that have hired our students. So we have worked with companies large and small to make sure that our curricula and our talent meet their hiring needs. And we're excited to work with all of these companies here and more. A little bit about our expansion. So we are expanding to Newark, Atlanta, and Los Angeles using a value-added approach, which means that we are looking for local businesses and community organizations that can support Knowledge House talent. So whether we are talking about offering the Knowledge House with free or discounted space, local volunteers that work at local employers, or connecting with community-based organizations to provide wraparound services to our talent. We are looking to partner with organizations for the rest of this year in preparation for in-person and hybrid services starting January of 2022. In Los Angeles, we have been exploring partnerships with organizations like Next Shift Learning, Ghetto Film School, and Dress for Success Worldwide, all our panelists on today's call, but also organizations like RedF. They have a workforce initiative called LA Rise that focuses on uplifting social enterprises. And so we look forward to bringing all of these partnerships to fruition so that the programs in our expansion sites are sustained. And so our four-pronged strategy includes partnering with local programs on the ground that already offer job training so that we can upskill those participants. Secondly, bring programs to local high schools that have an interest and focus on STEM. Partner with corporations on the ground to establish TKH as a pipeline. And finally, leverage government programs, funding, and resources to make the work sustainable. And so we have hired a team to lead this expansion in New York, including a new program manager, a director of programs and partnerships, a director of operations, and we will have not only recruitment and community engagement coordinators on the ground, but starting next year, we'll have local program coordinators per site. So with that, I would love to introduce our panelists. So first, I'd love to introduce Montea Robinson, the Executive Director at the Ghetto Film School in Los Angeles. Next, Tyler Bell is the Managing Partner at EleventoOne. Next, we have Sergio Rosas. He's the founder and CEO of Next Shift Learning. And finally, we have Kerry Weber, who is the branch manager of Dress for Success Worldwide West. So thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. I wanted to have each of you answer the first question. So now that I have introduced you all by name, I would love for you all to mention your role at your organization and answer the question, what role does your organization play in closing the digital divide? And we'll go in order of intro. So I'll start with you, Montea.
Thanks, Jerelyn. Hi, guys. I'm Montea. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm the executive director of Ghetto Film School in Los Angeles. Just to back up a little bit, Ghetto Film School was founded in 2000. Our mission is to educate, celebrate, and develop the next generation of great storytellers. We exist in Los Angeles, London, and New York. I oversee LA. My job includes running programming, operations, and local fundraising. When it comes to the digital divide, I think it's important to talk about GFS's origin story. You know, we were founded in 2000 in a rec center in the South Bronx. And at the time, our founder did a student exchange program at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And he saw a level of rigor and practical training in those classrooms that wasn't available to young artists in the Bronx. And so, you know, in bringing that back to our program and in starting Ghetto Film School, access has really been the underpinning of everything that we do, right? A couple of examples of what that looks like. You know, when our new students join GFS, they're accepted not on the basis of their film experience, their GPA, their family income, right? What we're looking for is passion and instinct. And from there on the first day, we put a camera in their hand, right? The idea is to get them into the driver's seat as storytellers and empower them through practical training to be as successful as we know they are inherently.
Thank you, Montea. Awesome. Tyler, how about you?
Yes, hello everyone. Really excited to be among such amazing panelists. So I'm Tyler Bell, the managing partner of EleventoOne. What we do is serve organizations by helping them really scale reach highest potential, primarily nonprofits and tech companies here in Los Angeles and across the country. And you know, our role in helping to close the digital divide is twofold. One, it's in helping organizations build systems that are inclusive and cultures that are community oriented and foster a sense of belonging. And then the second fold is being able to help organizations also attract and retain incredible talent. So whether it be through a systemic approach, through some of the relationships that we built here in Los Angeles with convening businesses and organizations, to, you know, inside of an organization, really having them leverage their internal people and their skills to be able to ensure that the systems that we're building today are made to include the greater Los Angeles community.
I love that. We're already getting different perspectives on how your organizations tackle different angles of the digital divide. How about you, Sergio?
Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you today. I'm Sergio Rosas, founder and CEO of Next Shift Learning. We're a workforce design studio. We focus on building economic freedom by shifting mindsets that ultimately shift futures. Our team is focused on creating engaging virtual learning experiences that enable underrepresented talent to see their potential, to share their strengths, and unlock networks with partner technology companies. We were founded in 2018 and have been working to really build a learning experience that leverages the power of technology. So because of the pandemic, we shifted to doing hybrid learning. Obviously, everything has been virtual since then. And so when we think of the digital divide, it's obviously important that we address areas like internet, that everyone have access to a laptop, but also to also take that and take it a step further, right? What can your laptop unlock for you in terms of new opportunities, particularly in the tech industry, when you look at the number of jobs that are now remote because of the pandemic? And so our sole focus is to make sure that learners get the access to the knowledge at partner companies to be able to break into tech.
Thank you, Sergio. And last but not least, Kerry.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here, Jerelyn. It's great to be a part of this conversation. So as Jerelyn introduced me, I'm Kerry Weber. I'm the branch manager for Dress for Success Worldwide West here in Los Angeles. And my responsibilities are operations and program management for us here locally. If you're not familiar with Dress for Success is the only free global employment resource for women. We've got about 140 locations across 25 different countries. And how we are working to, and I can speak for LA, how we're working to close the digital divide is through individual services as well as group services. So an individual service could be working with a career coach one-on-one to talk about your resume as well as your job search. Maybe it's a woman that has never done a job search or is coming back into the workforce. So a career kickstarter, a career relaunch, maybe she's never done an online job search before. So really helping her navigate that and track that, as well as helping her to build or understand a LinkedIn profile and how that is necessary now for helping to get a job. Through our workshops, we can educate women on skills that are needed now, the upskilling that's needed for jobs of the future, because jobs now are different than they were, 5, 10, 20 years ago. And so we want to make sure the women have relevant skills to not only get the job, but then to thrive and really succeed in the jobs that they get.
Great, thanks so much for those intros. I would love to talk about what the digital divide looks like in your community. And I'd love for you each to talk about what the digital divide has looked like pre-COVID and how COVID has impacted the issues that you all spoke to. And Kerry, would love to pick it up with you. Tell us about Dress for Success operations pre and post COVID and how it's impacted the women you serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So pre-COVID, all of our programming was in person. We were either seeing women in our boutique for their career coaching or their styling appointments where we suited them for their interview or their new job. And that came to an abrupt end in March of 2020 because of the pandemic. But I'm really proud to say that within a week, we were offering everything virtually. And so within a week, we had our volunteers set up and information out to our clients where they were able to do the one-on-one career coaching, as well as sign up for our virtual workshops. And the really great thing about going virtual, although, it was not too many stumbling blocks, but it was definitely a learning process. And it was something we had on the runway anyway, but the pandemic just kind of thrust us into it, which sometimes is just the best way to do things, just do it. But we were able to reach more women. There weren't the same barriers in place as there were when we would see women in person, right? There weren't as many transportation barriers because we could meet women where they were at, whether they had access to internet, if they didn't, or they didn't have a reliable internet, or they didn't have a camera, we would have phone calls with them. And so we're able to reach them. There also weren't as many barriers with childcare because they didn't have to get up that morning. And if the child was sick, I can't make this appointment now, right? If the child napped, we could still talk to her where she's at. So it's allowed us to reach more women, and also those that weren't familiar with technology, such as Zoom, or even having to do too much on their computer. It kind of got them used to doing it. And so they're more comfortable then when they go in for that virtual interview.
I love that. I love that the pandemic has allowed Dress for Success to reach more of your constituents. I know that happened for a lot of us. So, Montea, I would love to ask you, what the digital divide looks like for Ghetto Film School, and specifically, how has it impacted the film and media workforce pre and post COVID?
Really quick, I just want to say, Kari, I'm so glad that you brought that up. I think that, GFS also had the experience of finding unexpected opportunities to expand our services during the pandemic, right? And facilitate opportunities in a really unique way. So glad to hear that. When it comes to GFS, when we talk about access and the digital divide, the first thing to think about for us in a pandemic isn't how, it's why, right? We think about why we're doing what we do and how that shifts in a virtual environment. And so heading into the pandemic, we knew that we were going to have to move a majority of our programming virtual, but it wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. And our CEO, Stash Mintek, hey Stash, she's in the audience, asked all of the programming teams to think in terms of 4 questions. What unique opportunities are presented by this moment, right? Like Kari was mentioning, opportunities for virtual interviews that free up people's time. What things unfortunately will have to be postponed? What things can be rescheduled, which is crucially different than postponed, right? And oh, I just lost the last one. I'm mortified. Wow. I think it is, I'll just have to keep moving. Anyway, what that meant for us is that GFS, because we teach film production, is a program that and a craft that happens in person. So we think about what it's like to move the culture and the environment of that classroom into a virtual environment. And that means that it has to remain student-led. That was the most important thing in creating a pivot, right? Not necessarily whether it was Zoom or Google or whether it was Blue Jeans or what microphones were like or what the assignments were necessarily, but that it felt like something that the students were driving as a part of the process. We found that to be incredibly successful, but when thinking about those previous questions, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that the entire program would be virtual. We did invest significant resources and time, COVID safety protocols into making sure that our sort of capstone project did happen in person safely. We relied on GFS advisory panel members at LA Film and at SAG to make sure that we could run a really safe and buttoned up environment. A way to zoom out from there is that a couple of weeks ago, I sat on a panel hosted by the LA County Department of Education. And it was a panel between sort of the county and the entertainment industry looking back on COVID's effect on the workforce. And this is to your point, Jerelyn, there were really great outcomes there. The industry found that Hollywood sets in LA were places with the lowest rates of COVID transmission, right? And that is a real sort of feather in the cap of the county and the industry coming together to develop ironclad protocols, right? GFS can pivot virtually, but Hollywood has to show up in person. And so they did that really successfully. I'd say that the second part of your question, how the pandemic affected the workforce, what we heard from the county also is that unfortunately, there was a large majority of talent in Hollywood who are freelancers that had to rely on the EDD system, right? And there were a lot of lessons to be learned there about its efficacy. However, for the productions that were able to get back up, they were proud to, provide a safe and creative environment.
Thank you so much for that, Montea. So fun fact, Montea and I both are graduates of Ghetto Film School. So we're graduates of the program, and it's really exciting. Montea gets to close the digital divide when it comes to like digital media and storytelling and making sure that young people access those opportunities, especially in LA. There is an increase in digital media jobs, coming out of the media and entertainment industry. And as a Ghetto Film School alum, recently I joined a focus group with alumni. And same with Dress for Success and Ghetto Film School, like the virtual environment has allowed us to expand our services and reach more people. But it also has allowed more opportunities to explore like innovation. Something that came out of that alumni focus group call was the fact that while sets are closed, we can keep telling stories on social media. you know? So is there an opportunity for Ghetto Film School to teach that aspect of storytelling? Or, you know, we can study to become animators and the digital designers of these stories that we see on the big screen. And so it's really interesting, right? When we talk about COVID impacting the digital divide, some of it is good, some of it is not so great, right? Um, Tyler, so I'd love to move on to you because you'll provide the business perspective. So tell us how the nonprofits and the tech companies you work with, how they are experiencing this digital divide, and what have their needs been since the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I actually I didn't plan on sharing this, but in listening to Montea, it brought up an interesting point of something that I want to share the audience in regards to just some work that, like some data around like what the digital divide looks like according to like the FCC. And I don't know if I can share my screen. I think it may be disabled for me. But if not, I will talk about it regardless.
You can share it
And
now, Tyler, actually.
oh, okay, incredible. So yeah, so I'll just share a particular, if I'm able to, I don't know if I'll be able to. So it's just basically, I just want to show, and if it comes up, I'll talk about it. If it doesn't, it's okay. Um, just in regards to what the digital divide looks like in terms of the internet speed and connectivity, because that's really been the main place where, when it comes to a business standpoint, we've seen just how disruptive, the pandemic was disruptive in a number of ways, but a lot of people didn't think about the fact of, oh, well, do you actually have decent internet access? Are you able to connect if you live in South Los Angeles, as opposed to where a particular tech company's headquarters is? And that's been the main thing that's been top of mind for the businesses that I work with is, do the organizations where the people have employees or are looking for talent, are they able to even connect to Slack, for example, connect to the various systems and tools that people are using? And so for businesses, not only have they had to exhibit a lot more patience, but they've also had to, particularly tech companies, have had to exercise greater empathy than I think they would have prior to the pandemic. Because before, when you're having to come into an office, it's just kind of assumed, well, okay, you'll have everything that works because we've provided it. But it really gave people a window, no pun intended, into people's homes, into how people are living. You see organizations, there are some tech companies that have always been incredibly gracious around maternal and paternal care, but now that people have they've seen, you can't send your child anywhere, so you have to take care of that. There have been organizations that have been more compassionate and empathetic to just parenting, what that looks like, how that affects how a person shows up. Even more, just in terms of businesses, it's been a really, I think, challenging but amazing opportunity for people, particularly here in Los Angeles, to have some access to companies that otherwise may have been too far of a commute. So, for tech that is right now centrally located within the west side of LA, and then, there's a hub in downtown, geographically, there has been just like a transportation divide. So so us moving into a digital space has actually significantly torn down a barrier. But then when you look at the actual infrastructure that's in place, it's almost just re-emphasize another barrier that I'm hoping that through some of the partnerships that the mayor's office has with Verizon and other carriers, will really be able to service these areas that have unfortunately been, kind of ostracized and left out as outliers when it comes to being able to fully participate in the digital space.
Wow, thank you for that. Because your work supporting small businesses allows us to see, the job seekers they want to attract have issues, and the small businesses see those issues, right? When they can't connect to that potential talent in this virtual environment, or they can't operate in this virtual environment, or folks can't access opportunities because of transportation issues. So we heard a little bit about, digital divide, meaning accessing high-speed internet, technology devices, or just accessing economic opportunities, right? Sergio, I would love to talk about skilling, and before I ask you about what the digital divide looks like locally, I'd love to zoom out because you've done a lot of work at the national level, studying and improving tech talent pipelines. The Knowledge House was lucky to work with you with this Pay for Center grant 2 years ago from the Tech Done Right Challenge. I'd love to hear from you about what the digital divide, specifically like access to skills and job training, look like at a national level, and what you have learned from your national work. And then let's zoom in to Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, happy to take that. So in terms of some context for our work, what Jerelyn just mentioned, I was a program officer at the K4 Center overseeing this $1 million initiative that identified 10 organizations led by people of color across the country. We focused on 8 ecosystems from the Bronx to Kansas City, Oakland, LA, Baltimore, Atlanta, and a few others that I'm forgetting. But the whole focus was to enable them to grow as organizations within their context, to be able to increase the number of underrepresented folks of color into technology jobs. And so this is based on research that the K4 Center had done around the tech leaky pipeline. So the tech leaky pipeline, and you can go to their website or leakytechpipeline.com. It walks you through like an extensive amount of research over a series of years that essentially documents where from pre-K through 12, higher education, tech workforce, and entrepreneurship, where there are the leaks or where underrepresented folks of color end up falling off that pipeline in order to gain access to high wage, high paying jobs, or to build generational wealth. So you can build generational wealth either through working in a tech company that sets you up in terms of your salary trajectory, some of that in the form of equity, but then entrepreneurs in terms of ownership and building your own businesses, right? And so our goal was to go and analyze these tech ecosystems where organizations like the Knowledge House were working to build out those connections and be sort of that backbone organization to enable talent from low-income communities with backgrounds, whether they're first generation have intersectional identities, to be able to break in to the technology industry. And so we analyzed these 8 ecosystems. I want to share some stats, and we can share the report later because this has already been public. We looked at Albuquerque, Atlanta, Baltimore, the Bronx, Kansas City, LA, Oakland, and Washington, DC. And what we looked at is that we looked at a variety of different open data to essentially calculate a disparity ratio, right? And so the disparity ratio goes from 0 to 1. 0 means, 1 means that there are parity, meaning that those in tech mirror the population of those ecosystems, right? So if I look at the data, and I'm sorry I can't share screen, we have disparity ratios that range from 0.37 all the way to 0.45 across these 8 ecosystems, which means we're not doing a good job of getting folks into the technology industry, right? A couple of what that has been alluded, everything is systemic. It comes from pre-K through 12 education, whether they have access to computational thinking classes, so CS. I know California has a huge CS for All initiative, whether it's they have access to computers or laptops, right? California Emerging Technology Fund is one of several partners working across the state to be able to close that gap, along with AT&T, Comcast, to be able to do that cross-sector collaboration partnership. But in an area like Los Angeles, right, where you have essentially, based on the Pume's data that we analyzed, we have close to 4 million, right, of folks in the LA area, with a $13 billion between 2015 and 2019 of VC money, and we have a disparity ratio of 0.37. Okay, that 0.37. The one that is close to us is Kansas City. Kansas City only has 597,000, and their disparity ratio is 0.36. So LA, despite its diversity, is underutilizing the talent that's available here in the LA area to gain access to meaningful, high-wage, high-growth jobs, right? So there's two things at play here. One is we need to build the infrastructure to enable talent from South LA, from East LA, from Pacoima, the Valley, a lot of areas that have been historically underinvested in. One, to gain access to the infrastructure, to gain access to knowledge, which now lives in the internet. Like you can gain access to classes at Stanford, MIT, Harvard, right? By virtue of your laptop now, right? But then you also need to make sure that you have a cross-sector of partnerships within each ecosystem working hand in hand to be able to figure out how do we make sure that whatever gaps there are, we work to close them. And so we talked a lot about this, and I'm a firm believer that it's not about, it's about sharing, right? It's about coordination, right? So it's like, where does one organization's curriculum leave off students, and then where do they go next? And to be able to guide job seekers to the right resources in the ecosystem to get into the technology industry.
Thank you so much for that, Sergio. And you have now brought up digital literacy, like lack of computer science, education, computational thinking as a barrier, and the need for stronger infrastructure. So with that, I'd love to transition to corporate partnerships, right? Especially when it comes to skilling and job matching. You know, businesses need to be a part of this ecosystem. We need to work together. So this group, y'all have been implementing really innovative corporate partnerships. I'd love to hear about how corporations have responded to the digital divide, especially since the pandemic, and how they're just helping you in your everyday work. So Kerry, would love to start with you. So we were lucky enough to host a recruitment webinar for Dress for Success women. And I know that you are matching your women to other opportunities as well, including, you know, putting them in front of some of your corporate partners. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really great that we were able to introduce the women that we serve both here in LA and in New York to the Knowledge House. I know at least one woman here in LA was really excited about that opportunity and applied. So how we are getting opportunities to them. So it's basically networking, getting to meet people and the people that reach out to us. So Jerelyn you reached out to us. We have a connection with an electric vehicle charging station repair company here in Los Angeles, Charger Help. They have got a really great workforce development program. And so we did a fireside chat with them to talk to the women all about getting a job of the future, right, with electric vehicles, and how these technician jobs that historically people always think men could be women in these positions, and letting them know that there's opportunity to grow. So it's working one-on-one with companies that reach out to us, or we either have connections with, to get women into the jobs that will, like electric vehicles are here to stay. So that could be a career that really could take them for years, as well as on a national scope, relationships that our office in New York manages, like with Verizon. So Verizon is a great partner of Dress for Success. We have quarterly programs with them in different locations, here in LA, we've got one coming up in a couple weeks. And their whole goal and the whole reason they want their volunteers to work with us is to help bridge that digital divide. And so our sessions with them are, they give tips on some digital aspect, right? The LinkedIn, the online job search. And then they do career coaching. So we go into breakout rooms and they do one-on-one career coaching. So the women are getting to hear from, experts that work for a technology company. And, one of our pillars of learning is financial education. And so Capital One is another one of our great partners. We just finished cohort 1 with them of financial education, which is a 6-week program. Of course, this year done all on Zoom. It's usually conducted in one of their cafes, which is fun because those are great spaces if you've ever been to one. But again, it went really well on a virtual sense because we could have San Francisco and LA women together because there's an affiliate in San Francisco. So it was broadening that community as well as teaching them the digital skills they need for just existing and going to meetings and classes and sessions, as well as how to handle their money, how you manage that in online, right? So it was 1 or 2 weeks of the curriculum was about online banking and online security with your banking. And so we're really fortunate to have these great partners that, kind of have such a great value add to what we're doing locally for workshops, and just kind of bring their worth and their name to the programs, which does help attract more women to the programs because they're great people to learn from and great organizations to learn from. And I'll just add on one thing from what I said earlier. We have had such great success with our virtual programming that once it is safe to be back in person, we are definitely going to have a hybrid model because we realize the impact of being able to reach women virtually. So we want to see them again in person, but keeping a virtual aspect is important to us.
Awesome. Thanks so much for walking us through that, Kerry. We are also at the Knowledge House excited about hybrid programs versus 100% in person. So, Montea, I'd love to hear from you about a very exciting partnership that Ghetto Film School has with Netflix. Can you walk us through how that partnership was formed and what's the goal?
Totally. Netflix approached us at the beginning of this year looking to provide opportunities for Black content creators. So Netflix, a digital platform, is looking to invite a portion of our students to participate in a production contest that will result in work airing on their YouTube channel, Strong Black Lead, right? So as far as access goes, the preeminent digital streaming platform saying to GFS, pull up, right, is everything we could have asked for. Now, the thing that's really interesting is that our push over the last year and a half has been how to safely get back onto set, right? So while hybrid programming is a part of this opportunity, the real goal is that the students go out and shoot something in the world that lives on Netflix, right? In the Netflix space and has all its viewership. I'll tell you a little bit about the nuts and bolts. So it is a content creation competition. The idea is that our roster network, a 4,000 plus member network of diverse early career creatives from New York and Los Angeles, have an opportunity to pitch Netflix creators on a 5-minute short film. What was really great about this process, and sort of to the point of hybridity, is that the top 3 films that were selected, 2 came from creators in New York and 1 came from Los Angeles. After that, Netflix gave the directors a $25,000 budget to produce their films. You know, what's great about GFS training is that by the time they've gotten to this opportunity, you know, they've been through years of really rigorous training with us and independently in their own careers. And so that chunk of money really is something they can take a look at and say, how do I find efficiencies and stay really creative and know how to execute that at a really high level. We are just now in the post-production process, finishing up for the first year. We're really thrilled, you know, fingers crossed, to be able to have a live premiere towards the end of the year to really celebrate that work. And then we'll use that premiere to fold into a second year of programming. The reason I mentioned that is that, you know, it was really important upfront it was exciting to see that Netflix was interested in 2 years, right, of programming, building sustainability from the onset. Our goal after that is to, you know, evaluate the impact of programming from a sort of qualitative and quantitative standpoint, and then be able to scale from there.
Thank you so much. I think just seeing a corporation partner with a nonprofit in a super meaningful way, you know what I mean, to increase access, to diversify their work. And I know that it's happening a lot, like these private public partnerships, nonprofit corporate partnerships. I think that they are a good solution. So with that, I'd love to ask you, Sergio, about Next Shift Learning and their partnership with SNAP, because I know that y'all are working hand in hand to provide tech training to folks in LA. So can you walk us through that partnership, the benefits?
Yeah, that's been, SNAP has been one of the best partners that we've been able to work with. It's sort of, we've been working together throughout even my own like career changes. So we started working with SNAP back in 2015 when I was one of the founding directors for the LA Tech Talent Pipeline, which was a partnership, and is still a partnership with Mayor Garcetti that was housed at the Big Sur Exchange at the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. And so it started off with, you know, employee volunteers, right? So making sure that we were connecting students across 8 community colleges and 30 high schools that were part of this consortium called LA High Tech, with the goal of getting folks in the LA area into careers, whether it was software engineering, IT, or design and visual media, right? And so as a result of that, we built up this great relationship where by the time I left the Big Sur Exchange, we were working and placing 5,000 students, high school and community college students, through work-based learning activities across not just SNAP, but other companies in the LA area. When I went back to grad school, that's where I started to actually go deeper with SNAP. I ended up building SNAP's first, alongside with a team of collaborators, a 6-week learning experience focused on design and design fundamentals. And since then, it's just taken off. SNAP has increased their commitment to making sure that underrepresented young adults, particularly community college students, get access to high-wage, high-growth jobs and training. And so this year, we're getting ready to launch next week, not just the revamped SNAP Design Academy, but as well as academies focused on software engineering, augmented reality, and storytelling, which encompasses communications, marketing, and branding as well. And I think like one of the things that's been fantastic about it is having been both as a nonprofit partner way back in 2015 and now as a training partner, you start realizing that when you find a company partner, and I think, Montea, you talked about this, it's so important that you find a company partner that is willing to grow with you and to make those deeper investments to ensure that and I always call like participants, I call them learners, because we're in the business of like producing learning experiences, that these learners are able to bridge those gaps. But also like social capital to us is also really important. So when you're embedded within a company, you get access to employees that know the industry know-how, that we demystify how to navigate the industry. And then essentially what that does is also it increases a signal, right? So like Do I need to go to a top tier university or name brand institution to be able to say that I had the opportunity to work at Snap for 8 weeks, or that I was able, in your case, Montea, to pitch and then work with Netflix on this project? That increases your signal, right, to the industry as a whole. And so personally, I find there's a multifaceted approach to how to get learners into bigger companies, and let's not forget about our small and medium businesses as well as our startups. But I think that it's important that we look for partners that are willing to make that co-investment. And I always use co-design as an important element, that it's, we're building this together. I'm learning what you're looking for. I'm also telling you what these learners need. And we're finding a way to build an optimal learning experience that essentially gives them the opportunity to explore freely, and that other folks outside of the key stakeholders, but the employees, also make an investment in those learners as well. So it really does take this community to come together to really make sure that we start to build that. And I do think that as we think of, there's the post-pandemic, I don't know when post-pandemic actually happens or starts, but I do think that this hybrid model is going to be here to stay, because it's the only way to really achieve scale versus like in person. An area like Los Angeles, like traffic is back to where it was before the pandemic. And so trying to get to the different tech hotspots throughout LA is very difficult. And so we need to be able to have hybrid models to enable learning to happen simultaneously, that also meets the demands that a lot of these learners in LA are coming from. Some of them have 2 part-time jobs, they have families of their own, they are the breadwinners, and so we need flexibility to ensure that they're stable to take care of themselves and their families, but they're also able to advance in their own careers. And our partner Snap really truly understand that and embraces that by providing these wraparound services to ensure that scholars that are selected into their academies are well taken care of. So, I'd love to see more companies in LA step up in that way to be able to provide that level of investment for us to continue to scale and grow the opportunities here in Los Angeles.
Thank you for that. And speaking of small businesses, Tyler, I would love to ask you, what can corporations do to support small businesses, right? Because in your work, it's so holistic. You are supporting businesses with their talent, with their IT needs, streamlining their operations. So I really see your work supporting small businesses as like a way to achieve systems change, right? As everyone has said on the webinar today, folks need to work together. The community organizations, the corporations, the small businesses. So what advice do you have to stakeholders that have resources, right? That can invest in these initiatives for the long term? What does that look like, strengthening the infrastructure for this work and systems change?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's a combination of everything that Sergio, Montea, and Kerry have all alluded to earlier, and even the work that you're doing with the Knowledge House as well. I think it starts with one, making sure that you're taking care of your own internal stakeholders, your current employees, understanding who they are. I think the pandemic has shown people that, oh, I didn't even know your commute was that far, or that you didn't have internet access. So taking care of people, taking the opportunity to listen and understand who they are. Second, it's intentional convening. So, working with their peers and other organizations who are in their space. For example, I think the SNAP Next Shift Learning Partnership is a great example of 2 parts of LA coming together to be able to create something that benefits all of LA. And then even more so, what I think that looks like tangibly is investing in neighborhoods, going to neighborhoods, building your offices or your HQs or satellite offices in neighborhoods that do have incredible talent. You look at all of the resources that Los Angeles has, and one of my good friends always says that, Los Angeles' greatest resource is its people. And I think that's true of many cities, but especially here in Los Angeles, where you have just such a diversity of people, thoughts, the same way that we celebrate the output of these communities, obviously, typically with cuisine, we need to make sure we're celebrating the actual humans and the people that create the cultures that make Los Angeles the amazing city it is. And then lastly, I think it's just intentionally investing as well. So not only in the offices, but in the infrastructure, leveraging more private public partnerships to make sure that our transportation systems, to make sure that our infrastructure of all types, whether it be water, adequate and sufficient housing, as well as, just being able to keep a constant connection. If I'm going down the Slauson corridor, would be incredible. It shouldn't be where, just because I'm coming from the west side, I'm able to get 5G, and then, as soon as I cross over past, Palms on the 10, like I get a particular service interruption, or even going down to 110 north and south. So those intentional investments and just having more conversations that are action oriented. I think this has been amazing with some insights from peers, but just having more conversations where we can say, cool, all right, you've given us this information. Now, here's the roadmap of what we can do next. And I think Montea gave a great example of how that's transpiring at Netflix, Kerry and her partnerships, and Sergio as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tyler. We need to walk the walk, not only talk the talk. And so with that, I do want to turn it over to some Q&A. We have some questions in the chat and in the Q&A feature. The first question is from Chris Mercado. He is the Knowledge House head of career success. And his question is, are there any initiatives regarding partnerships or upskilling in Los Angeles that have been ineffective based on outcomes? Community support, partnerships, etc. And why, right? And so anyone can answer this question.
I could take that, Jerelyn.
Okay, happy, yeah. Go ahead, Sergio.
I think like one of the areas that I want to pinpoint is upskilling, right? So one of the things that I found, and just having been on the ground working with a variety of different partners, both corporations, philanthropic, and government, is that when it comes to curriculum development, not a lot of folks understand the importance of not replicating some of not the best practices that we see in K through 12 or in post-secondary education, right? There is this model of essentially an instructor or a teacher being sort of the knowledge holder and doing 80% of the talking. And so if we want to avoid replicating inequities within our system, right, we have to be able, as curriculum designers, as instructional designers, to come together and reverse that. So what does it look like to create a classroom experience that mirrors the experiences that you see at Harvard, at Stanford, at MIT from a pedagogical sense, to be able to essentially say, hey, instead of doing 80% of the talking at someone, what if it was reversed, right? And what if it was a form of project-based inquiry, right? Where learners are the ones that are doing hands-on projects, and the coach or the teachers and the instructors serve as coaches and guides, right? Essentially, what we're looking at when you look at learning science, there's a fundamental theory about the transferability of skills, meaning if I worked at Starbucks and I worked at McDonald's, or I worked at Nike, right, at a retail store, I've picked up all of these different skills. Now, my job as a curriculum and instructional designer is to build an experience that focuses on those lived experiences and then translates that into a new context. So you may be working at Starbucks and Nike, but like your passion and what you're studying is software engineering, right? And you haven't been able to get a software engineering tech internship in 2 years. How do I leverage what you've learned, right? The pieces of that to build a curriculum that just bridges those gaps. So what you do is translate it into context, and then we provide the essential knowledge, skills, and capabilities through project-based learning to be able to get you to level up at that point, right? And so one thing that I've learned is that there's an underinvestment in curriculum and curriculum design, and bringing instructional designers, bringing in subject matter experts from the industry. That's one of our models, is to bring in folks that have worked as software engineers, as recruiters, to come in to not just only focus on our domain disciplines, right, which is right now augmented reality, software engineering, design, et cetera, but also our professional development curriculum, right? We're working with recruiters like from technology companies to be able to infuse that and bridge that gap. So I will say a best practice here is invest in the learning experience as much as possible, and work to provide the right infrastructure, so i.e. laptops, hotspots, etc., for scholars coming from these communities.
Thanks for those gems, Sergio. The Knowledge House will definitely take that advice, as we are literally improving our programs every single year. It's a part of our process, and we are so fortunate to be in conversation with leaders like you all to just support the Knowledge House as we grow and improve in the years ahead. So thank you so much, Chris, for your question. Shari Walker also has a question for GFS. So we're gonna try to connect her to you, Montea. She has a question about the GFS roster program. And we are out of time. So I really, really want to thank our panelists and our attendees for joining the conversation today. And we have a conversation with Newark community leaders coming in half an hour. So if you have not signed up, please do. And we are accepting applications for our upcoming youth and adult programs that start next month. So we are accepting applications all through June, and you can go to theknowledgehouse.org/apply to learn more. So thank you all so much again, and onward. We will implement these gems and stay in conversation. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Sergio.
You all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.